Okay, so it's 7:05. So we are so happy to have all of you here for our webinar for our student action panel. We wish that we could have you all in person, but because of the pandemic, we're gonna all have to be bonded with one another over the internet, over the interwebs. We're really excited to kind of present our speakers to you all and have you all get to know us and the work that we do at MDEHR. So I want to start by having our four interns introduce themselves. Ethan, can you start?
Yeah, thank you, Venus. Hey, everyone, and thank you so much for coming. My name is Ethan McNary, pronouns he, him. I am a freshman at Towson University's Honors College, former graduate of WNA. I see you guys in the chat, and I'm so grateful that you're here. Thank you, Dr. Kennedy, for coming as well. I know you're very busy, so I appreciate you being here. Um, I'm super stoked to have all of you here and to talk about the amendment. This is something that is near and dear to me. I've been working on this amendment and with the campaign, Rabbi Cardin, for 3 years now. So it is something that I hold closely to me and is something that's very important to me. And I hope by the end of this call, everybody will feel a little bit more understanding of what the amendment is and also how, the steps they can take to work on behalf of the amendment, to further it. It has been there have been their ups and downs working on the amendment. I've really enjoyed the entire process, a lot of learning experiences. But I think the overall goal of at least tonight's event, in my opinion, is just to have everybody here on this call feel like they can use their voice when working with legislators, working with organizations, and be able to take the steps that they feel to fill the roles that they want to and make the change they want to see, wherever that may be, whether it's with the campaign, with the amendment, with other kinds of social advocacy, environmental advocacy, or whatnot. We're just happy to have you. So thank you. And I will turn it over to our next intern.
Thank you, Ethan. And thank you all so much for being here. My name is Madeline, and I'm from Medfield, Massachusetts. I'm a senior at Loyola University, and I am the communications intern for MDEHR. So I run our social media accounts, and I work to spread the campaign's message through different mediums and platforms in order to reach as many people as possible. I've been very interested in environmental politics for a while now, so I'm excited to be working with MDEHR this semester and learning more about the political process for passing an amendment and working towards creating the amendment for environmental human rights in Maryland.
I'm Venus. I am a senior at Loyola University, Maryland. Shout out, we have our student body president-elect here on the call, which is wonderful. Hi, Trevor. I am a biology major from Brookfield, Connecticut, and I started getting involved in kind of environmental justice probably when I got into college and I saw the intersection between public health inequity and environmental injustice. I want to be a doctor when I grow up, so that's something that I wanted to kind of deal with, like the root cause of a lot of people's public health issues, and that's usually where they live in their environment. And so I do a lot of like public health research about environmental inequity, and just like looking at the data and then kind of scrubbing it and doing summaries and things like that. A lot of equity and like racial justice work for the organization, and I'm really happy to be here.
Hello, everyone. My name's John. I'm the legislative outreach intern for the campaign. I'm from Rockford, Massachusetts, but I currently live in Bethesda, Maryland, where I'm a second semester senior at American University. I'm studying political science and history. Over the last 4 years, I've interned at nonprofit organizations and various roles, but I've always been interested in applying my studies to environmental activism. And this campaign is my first role directly involved in political action. Here, my role is mainly to communicate the need for an environmental human rights amendment to legislators. And to me, the amendment represents a platform to empower citizens to maintain a safe and healthful environment. I'll be with the campaign until May. That's when I graduate. And I hope to continue my work on campaigns and environmental justice when that time comes. Thank you, guys.
Alrighty, thank you. And it's been great working with all the student interns. You guys are awesome. And I really appreciate all the work you've done to help put tonight's event together. I'm going to talk for the next few minutes about what the amendment actually is, so that all of us on this call have a firm understanding of what the Maryland Amendment for Environmental Human Rights is, how you can get behind it, and how you can support it. So what is the amendment? The amendment is a bill that is proposed and is saying, or is trying to amend the Maryland Constitution to say that all Marylanders, including future generations, have the right to a healthful environment, including clean air, clean water, clean land, and a stable climate. It also says that Maryland's natural resources are the common property of everyone in the state, and that it's the government's job to protect them. Also, Marylanders are able to sue the government if their right to a healthful environment is violated and their standing. So those are three main points of what the amendment is. And let me break those down briefly. So currently, Maryland's environmental regulation is an interwoven collection of bills ranging from granular substance bans to wide-reaching climate initiatives. And there's been a lot of good work done, but there's tremendous vulnerability in this process and in our current framework of environmental legislation. What an amendment would do is create a foundation. It would say that all Marylanders have the fundamental and inalienable right to a healthful environment. So where those gaps are now in our environmental regulation in the state would be no longer. I see the amendment as another tool in the toolbox for environmental justice. When there have been problems or harm done, citizens can go forward and say, look, my right to a healthful environment has been infringed upon, and action needs to be taken to rectify that. Now, I want to look briefly at what the bill actually says, because I know that sometimes bills can seem kind of nebulous and intangible. This is what the bill looks like. It's a constitutional amendment. It would amend Maryland's Declaration of Rights, where a bunch of other rights go, like the freedom of speech, right to due process. Your right to a healthful environment would go in there as well. And what it says is, for the purpose of proposing an amendment to the Maryland Constitution to establish that every person has the fundamental and inalienable right to a healthful environment, specifying that the state's natural resources are the common property of each person, and specifying that the state is a trustee of the air, land, water, living, and historic resources, which shall be protected, preserved, and enhanced for the benefit of all people, including future generations. Now, that's a lot, and it sounds like a lot. But what this really means to me is a number of different things. The first is it takes a stance on environmental justice. So communities of color and low income suffer disproportionate concentrations of pollution and environmental degradation, such as higher rates of asthma, inadequate access to healthcare, proximity to polluting sites, facilities, and industries, and they're most likely to experience the worst outcomes of COVID-19. Now, these are due to a number of different factors, but Maryland's environmental legislation is precarious. Despite the progress that has been made, there are still many problems, such as unsafe drinking water, toxic air pollution, contaminating facilities, sites, and industries, and the worsening effects of climate change. So this amendment takes a stance and says that there are still problems in the state, and that Maryland are still being harmed, and that we are giving the power back to the citizens to sue if their right to a healthful environment is infringed upon in their standing. So where are we now? We just came out of another session, the legislative session for 2021, and there were a number of different factors competing in this session. We had COVID-19, A bunch of other bills and priorities were set in the General Assembly that needed to be focused on. We still wanted to introduce the bill this year. We recognized it as a crucial piece that is missing in our state. There's so many things going wrong which intersect with environmental justice and environmental health. And the amendment would be another, it wouldn't be a silver bullet, but it would be another tool in the toolbox that we could use to uphold public health, uphold environmental rights, and protect our biosphere. And we decided in that moment that we should carry forward with the amendment for this year. Right now, it's in subcommittee. It's looking like it won't pass. So what we're doing right now is gearing up for our next legislative session. And what that requires us to do is do a bunch of outreach and education, reaching out to young people and students primarily is my job as a student organizer, and get that youth voice involved in the process of the amendment and make sure that our legislators know that we want this passed, that our legislators know that the young people of Maryland are, we are desperately in need of a new tool, a new framework for how we do legislation. So right now, it's a lot of behind the scenes work. It's a lot of reaching out to different organizations. It's a lot of emailing back and forth. The work that you guys can do right now, though, is get involved, contact your legislators, which we'll be doing in a little bit. And I'm going to turn it over to some Sunrise Movement speakers, and they're going to talk to you a little bit about the process of getting involved.
Thank you, Ethan. I would like to introduce you all to 3 speakers tonight. Each of them are members of different Sunrise hubs in Maryland. First, let me introduce you all to Thomas Moberly. Thomas is 19, and he's a member of the Sunrise Movement Hub in Frederick, where he has been on the training team for 6 months. Outside of Sunrise, Thomas volunteers doing conservation work at Cunningham Falls State Park. He's always been interested in the environment, but was inspired into activism after seeing some local Sunrise Movement actions. Thomas now fights for a world where everyone has their basic needs met, which he says cannot be done without realizing our dependence on a healthy environment. Next, oh, go on, yeah.
Are you introducing first, or should I go?
Oh, no, sorry, I almost went too far. You good.
All right, thank you. So I kind of wanted to start off talking about why we need something like this. You know, are environmental crises in Maryland really that bad? Are people's rights really being violated? I like you said, I work at Cunningham Falls State Park doing conservation work. We're kind of at the eastern edge of the Appalachian mountain range. And every day when I go home from work, or when I go home volunteering, I pass the Spountain Spring, is what they call it. Out in a town called Yellow Springs, there is this just open mountain spring that a huge number of residents get their drinking water from. You can walk by and they'll be down there with jugs collecting fresh water to use in their homes. And a lot of that water is threatened by increasing development, by climate change in our watershed, right? And when we've been in, I've done some work with Sunrise Frederick, and we had people come up to us and talk about things like our very agricultural county, pesticides, right? A lot of pesticides spraying near people's homes. And while we have banned some pretty nasty pesticides in Maryland, we still have some pretty nasty ones around, right? There's a lot of been reports in Frederick City lately about decreasing air quality, right? And one of the things I just kind of want to drive home is that when we think of environmental issues, we often think of, you know, the polar bears or the Amazon rainforest, but we all really rely on having a healthy environment. And if you have not faced an environmental crisis yet, you are going to, especially with things like climate change, which will threaten our infrastructure, threaten some of our food security, a lot of these things. And so I encourage everyone to really look around your area, and you will start seeing a whole lot of different environmental issues that affect people on an everyday basis, right? That is why we need to really reframe and reorient of having a healthy environment as human rights, as the basis for everything else. I know with Sunrise Frederick, we have worked a lot with our county's climate mobilization group. And they were established about 6 months ago, and they're busy making recommendations to our county council. And I think it would be much more powerful if we in our communities not only had the power to try and push for these kinds of working groups to be established, but actually have the teeth to enforce those recommendations, right? If we see that they are not going far enough and our communities are still being hurt. So I think that's pretty much what I wanted to say. Just look around you. I'm sure you will find many, many environmental issues and very quickly realize how important things like this amendment are. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Our next speaker tonight is Alex Norbrook. Alex is a high school junior and a member of Sunrise Movement Baltimore, where he is a political team co-lead for the Hub. He also helps lead the federal team there. Alex has been passionate about climate change for as long as he can remember, and through Sunrise, he has combined that passion with real activism in government.
Sorry, just finding the unmute button there. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Alex. I use he and pronouns. Thank you for the introduction, John. And thank you, Ethan, for inviting me to speak, and also thank you for everyone who made this meeting possible. So, yeah, as John said, I've always been kind of interested, you could say, in the environment and climate change that's affecting this entire planet. But I think what really made that the amorphous thing of climate change real to me on a daily basis was doing an internship over the summer about invasive vines and invasive plants more generally. It really opened my eyes to like a whole new danger that I didn't even know was happening, and it's a threat present throughout the entire state. Ecosystems are getting overwhelmed. Basically, it's just an invasive plant is just a plant that's been introduced to America and is causing damage in this place because there's no natural checks and balances to stop their growth. So invasive plants are really a symbol of dominance that we have over our land. They're a symbol of the power we have. And they represent how nowadays nature as a whole is neglected and sidelined because no one seems to be doing anything to stop their spread. As long as it doesn't get in our way, people, especially those in power, just ignore natural threats. Now, I saw this same situation I had learned about over the summer happening in cities across Maryland. Large polluting companies are literally choking communities in the same way that the vines choke forests, especially for low-income communities and communities of color who are disproportionately affected by air pollutants. Now, obviously, the situations aren't identical, but we see a twofold assault on both our ecosystems and our people. So I took on a role in Sunrise to do something about these issues, to try to fight back against them. And it's been very rewarding. And from that, I see how important an environmental human rights amendment would be. It's a necessary component for our state. It says that people get an inalienable right to a healthy environment. So by enacting this amendment, we're able to solve the problem of the sidelining of environmental health, both from the perspectives of humans and from ecosystems. It will show the state's commitment to helping reinforce places getting overwhelmed by polluting factories. And by giving humans an environmental right, by definition, that means we're promising our ecosystems that we're going to repair them and give them just as much of a right to thrive as we do ourselves. It helps us rethink our relationship with the land. We realize that we need nature in order to survive. We can't just dominate it. And climate change is making that much clear, but it needs to be a factor in our legislature and in our Bill of Rights. But factoring in the health of ecosystems doesn't just help us survive, it helps us thrive too. In the same way, environmental health isn't just the absence of pollution nearby, it's the positive creation of green spaces, of sustainable buildings, of clean jobs, and repairing forests and rivers and plains that are crippled by pollution and usurped by invasive plants. It allows us to fight back against the twofold perils of on our ecosystems and on our people. So yeah, thank you all for listening, and I'm excited to get into some actions tonight.
Thank you, Alex. All right, our third speaker for tonight is Naya Kanjar. Naya is a sophomore at the University of Maryland and an active member of the UMD Sunrise Hub. Since this hub is still new, she and other members are working hard to expand the Sunrise UMD, while also getting involved with activism on the local and state level. Naya got involved with environmental activism while doing research on environmental justice issues in the state of Maryland, and has continued ever since.
All right, hi everybody. I'd just like to say thank you again for having me, and thank you to everyone who came out to join us. I am here today with Sunrise UMD in support of this amendment. I am a part-time resident of both Prince George's County, where I go to school, and Cecil County, which is my hometown up in Northern Maryland. So Maryland's always been my home. I hold it very near and dear to my heart, and I care very greatly about the health of both the people here and the environment. So I personally believe there are countless reasons why this amendment is necessary. Thomas and Alex have touched on some of the major points, and I agree wholeheartedly. The one I am most familiar with and the one that got me into environmental activism is environmental injustice in the state of Maryland. And Ethan touched briefly on this earlier in the presentation, so I apologize for the redundancy, but across the state, there are far too many examples of environmental injustice where entire communities, often of low income and with high percentages of Black and Brown residents, are experiencing damaging environmental and health impacts from various things, but a lot of it comes from industrial emissions from facilities that were developed and operate under approval from the state. And I have worked with the Maryland School of Public Health and doing research on environmental justice in the state and in other parts of the country as well, specifically looking at the impacts of industrial farming operations, heavy metal contamination sites, and other toxic hazards on both public and environmental health. So just a couple of examples of issues that are really prevalent in the state of Maryland that really show why we need this amendment. On the Eastern Shore, low-income communities are disproportionately burdened by industrial farming operations, specifically poultry farming operations, which release a lot of dangerous chemicals into the surrounding environment, such as particulate matter, ammonia, and nitrates. And these communities surrounding these operations experience elevated levels of respiratory disease, cancer, and other serious health concerns that communities that are unburdened by these facilities don't experience at nearly as high of a rate. Additionally, in urban areas across the country, but in the state of Maryland as well, Black and Brown communities are located closer to environmental hazards such as Superfund sites, brownfields, and toxic release inventory sites. And a lot of this is related to historical racist redlining practices, but it results in poor air quality in these areas, and poor environmental health results in a lack of economic development, which really deprives these areas of the opportunity to make any progress in terms of economic prosperity. And injustices such as these are happening literally in our backyards. And while grassroots organizations like Sunrise are fantastic and effective, this amendment is really necessary to make the goal of environmental justice and environmental health more realistic for the state of Maryland. We, the young people, are the ones that are ultimately going to experience the negative impacts of poor environmental regulation well into our adult lives. And we're the ones that have been fighting for environmental justice and racial justice for ages, and watching as many of these issues persist despite truly phenomenal efforts on many of our parts. So we truly do need this amendment, and we need it to ensure, as exactly as it states, that we have a healthful environment for all Marylanders, both present and future. And like so many things, it's going to be the pressure from people like us that makes all the difference to getting this amendment passed. So thank you so much again for joining us today and learning more about it.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much, Sunrise Movement, for coming tonight. You guys are incredible, and I love working with y'all. inspiring as always, prophetic as always. All right, we're going to take the next few minutes and we're going to do a call to action. So we have a couple of links that we'll be dropping in the chat. And what we're going to be doing is contacting our legislators. So you can call if you feel comfortable, and I encourage you to do so. It's nerve-wracking the first few times. It still is for me, and I've been doing it for a while. But I think it's more effective than an email. But if you feel like an email would be more comfortable for you, feel free to do that. I encourage you to do that. And then the third link, which you can find, we'll be dropping 2 links. The first one is mdelect.net, which is where you'll find out who your legislators actually are. And make sure that you click on your state legislators. Of course, we're talking about Maryland, not a federal issue. So look out for your senators and delegates, and those are the folks you'll be calling. Once you've identified that, just click on their names. That'll take you to the Maryland General Assembly website, where you can find their office phone number. We're after hours now, so nobody should be picking up. You'll just leave a voicemail. In that Google document is where you'll find the scripts. So we've written out scripts for you for emailing or for calling. Feel free, and I would also encourage you to personalize those scripts either in your head, or you can write something else down and use that as inspiration. Personalized messages go a long way. And then also reiterating that you're a constituent also goes a long way. And then also maybe include your school or how old you are, because that youth voice is compelling for a lot of legislators. And then the final link that you'll see at the top of the Google document is our Action Network campaign. And it may seem redundant, but that also sends another letter to your legislators asking for them to support it. Don't feel bad that you're sending them so many messages. It's their job to listen to you. So you're well within your rights to do what we're doing today. And that also puts you in our system, so you'll get updates about the amendment, and then also how you can get involved in the future if you want to. So what we're going to do is all go on mute, and just so that we're not hearing each other when we're calling. And we're going to spend the next 10 minutes or so calling our legislators. I will be dropping in the chat just like when we'll be coming back to wrap up tonight's event. But for the next few minutes, we are going to focus on contacting our legislators in support of the amendment. And then also, if you have any questions, just type them in the chat and I'll be looking at that and monitoring it if anything should come up. All right, everyone, I still see a few people calling, so we'll come back in just 1 minute. Alrighty, if there are still people calling, no worries. Feel free to just turn the volume off so you don't have to listen to my voice, and then just wrap up your call. For those of you who have finished sending out your emails and all your calls, I thank you so much. That is super appreciated, and it goes a long way. Even just, a legislator receiving a few calls from their constituents about an issue is really impactful. So I'm going to turn it over to Madeline to close us out for the night.
Yeah, so now we would love for each of you to tell 3 people you know to sign our Action Network campaign, which we can put in the chat, and to contact their legislators just as we showed you tonight. And we also have a pledge for people to sign, which I'll put in the chat right now. And lastly, social media is an extremely important way to spread the word and show your support for the amendment. So please follow us on our social media. Our Instagram is at MDEHR_, and our Twitter is at MDEHR for all. And we encourage you to repost anything that we put up. Thank you so much.
And just one more piece, if you want to get more involved with the amendment, we would love your help. It takes a village, and the more people we have behind us pushing for this amendment, the more power we'll have. So if you want to reach out and get more involved, please contact us at nina@mdehr.org, or feel free to reach out to me, McNary Ethan@gmail.com, Or if you have a couple things you'd like to say, feel free to stay on the call for a little bit. And, we've got till 8. If anybody wants to talk a little bit about the amendment, if you have any more questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And that's all we have for tonight. So thank you so much for coming. And yeah, just remember to tell 3 people to get plugged in with the amendment. Thank you.
Well, before we go, I'm Nina Carden, and I just wanted to thank Ethan and Venus and John and Madeline for putting together this fabulous webinar, and for our Sunrise speakers. You all were articulate and passionate and compelling. We are recording this, and we do hope to use snippets of what you have said to share with our legislators and with other people we want to encourage to support this amendment, because your voices, as Ethan said in the beginning, your voices are even more powerful than many adult voices. You are the future. This is about you and for you. Legislators listen to you in a way they do not listen to more seasoned folks. You do not have the same, conditions of being cynical and tried, by life's hurts and harms. There's an innocence there. So your voices are so powerful, and we're very, very grateful for you coming today, and for all of you who participated, and for all of you who wrote those emails and spoke on the phone to the legislators. You should know that we have heard again and again, legislators tell us it only takes about 20 phone calls to turn their heads to say, oh, I really have to pay attention to this. This is something that I gotta look at more seriously. So the more you tell people, the more they call, the more they email, the more we get a buzz, the more we get momentum, the more likely it is that we'll get this amendment passed in the coming session. So thank you all so much. One of the other things I put in the chat was, I know this was very, it was a quick overview. It was an introduction to it, and we'd be delighted to speak with you more over the course of the coming year to help you understand it better and to better prepare you to be a proponent and supporter of this. So be in touch.
Hi, I had a question. Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, perfect. So, I guess my question, so like from the perspective, like a college student, and like obviously, well, so I'm home right now, and home is not in Maryland. But doing some like other work that I've been involved in on campus, I know there's sometimes they struggle with students who are not in Maryland, or can be apprehensive to or not as passionate as being involved in Maryland politics as they would be elsewhere. So what advice would you give to a student who's like, I don't see the point of me participating in, say, these calls or these emails or this work? What advice would you give to a student like that to participate?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and I'll answer it. And if anybody else wants to answer it as well, feel free. I've organized with students who are out of state before, and for policies and policy positions in Maryland specifically. And it is more compelling when you contact a legislator and you can say that you're a constituent, and you are. That's what their job is. And I've spoken with legislators, and they've been bluntly honest with me when they're not, when they're not my representative. They'll say, I'm paid to care about my constituents. But all that set aside, if you're a student in Maryland, everything around you impacts you. The state of the water quality, the state of the air quality, and also you have, in my opinion, this is me, sharing my morality with you. I feel a certain sense of obligation to the people around me, to do work on behalf, whether there's an arbitrary borderline or not. There is an obligation to ensure, that everybody has the right to a healthful environment. And I would be doing this work if I was in Maryland, or if I was in New Jersey, if I was in Texas, or if I was in Nicaragua. So I think, another compelling thing is organizing students who are constituents, going down to Annapolis and saying, maybe you wouldn't be the one to testify on behalf of the amendment, but you could definitely do so much work for the amendment, for the campaign, or in, other areas of environmental or other forms of policy. even though you aren't a constituent. I still think it's very possible.
That was a great answer, Ethan. Yes, exactly that. You can still be an ambassador. You can still be a spokesperson. You can still organize, and all those things would be absolutely invaluable to the effort.
Oh yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
What about just a regular, good old-fashioned letter writing campaign? Write a letter, mail it, because like you said, 20 people, you tell the legislator, I'm interested in something, they got to look at you. But when you give them a pile of letters like this on their desk, they'll really pay attention to that. I mean, I know it's a little old-fashioned, I'm in my 60s, but I think that could work too. If everyone could send 5 letters to the state people, legislators, I think that would make a difference too. Maybe even a bigger one.
Letters are more difficult to send. You're absolutely right, which is why they have a bigger impact than an email or than a phone call. So you're absolutely right. To write means that someone is extremely dedicated, and that carries an additional amount of weight. So I totally agree. By the way, it can also be just a postcard in case people just want to have a postcard. But you're absolutely right, Bart. That's a great idea. Okay. All right, folks, I'm going to disconnect us then. Okay.
Thank you all. Have a good night.